Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this part of the service. If you want to turn in your Bibles a while to Genesis chapter 6. I want to consider Noah for a while this evening. I know I didn't write that on the paper because it wasn't that long ago that I still didn't know what I was going to talk about. So anyhow, here we are. So I want to touch a little bit on, or get a little bit of a backdrop on Noah's life from out of the end of chapter 5, then talk some about chapter 6 and some, maybe the first part of chapter 7 in Genesis as well. I thought originally when I started into this that I would probably be able to cover, Noah's, his family, them building the ark and through the flood and everything. And then I sort of found out then that was too much. So I studied as far as I could and ran out of time. And so anyhow, I guess we'll see how far we get. But so I would like to read all of chapter 6 and chapter 7. Do I have any volunteers that would like to read, say maybe split chapter 6 about halfway, 2 people read that, and 2 people read chapter 7. Is there anyone that wants to volunteer to read? Okay, Michael, Steve, Spencer, one more? Keith Summers? Okay. Looks like we have about 22 verses there in chapter 6 and 24 in chapter 7. So Michael and Steve, if you want to read, if you want to stand and read chapter 6, Michael, you can read the first part and Steve the second part, and stand to read it. So.
Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man, and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence.
And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before you, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Brooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. And everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife and thy sons' wives with thee. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he.
Okay, thank you. Spencer, chapter 7, verses 1 through 12, and then Keith, finish the chapter then.
Chapter 7, verse 1. And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, into the ark, because of the waters of the flood, of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights.
In the selfsame day entered Noah, and Shem, and Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in, male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare upon the ark, and it was lifted up above the earth. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters, and the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heavens were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle, and of beasts, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land, died. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days.
Okay, thank you. So, looking back here at the end of, a little bit at the end of chapter 5, it says, so Noah's father was Lamech, and he was 182 years old when Noah was born. And then, so now then, turning over into chapter 6, the chapter, it starts out talking about how wicked the earth had become, or the inhabitants of the earth, rather. I don't want to spend just a lot of time on this, but just a couple things here. Verse 2 mentions about the intermarriage between, it says, the sons of God and the daughters of men. Now, there is some kind of various opinions on what that might mean exactly, but it seems like most people, commentators that is, would feel like that the sons of God was probably meaning descendants from Seth, and then the daughters of men were descendants of Cain. So we have this marrying between godly and ungodly. And like usually happens, when you mix good with bad, the good doesn't usually win. And so the offspring of these relationships was very wicked. It's just what it tells us. So verse 5 says, the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So it paints a pretty kind of a bleak picture about the setting here. But this is where things were. And he goes on to say in verse 6 that it repented the Lord that he had made man, and it grieved him at his heart. So man had taken his own way and had departed from God, and the result was wickedness. So God is sorry that he even created man. But there was a bright spot here, and that is Noah and his family. I'm not sure how Noah and his family had stayed faithful. I don't know if it really tells us anywhere that if there was something specific about Noah that some experience he had that kept him from going like everyone else around him. But the Bible tells us that Noah was a just man in verse 9, and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. So we have a bright spot here. We have a family here that was still doing what was right. Verse 9 says, it's actually verse 8. It says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. I'd never really stopped to consider that verse and what it might actually mean up until now. What I found is that, so it says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And I think we can find a parallel for us today, that just like in our day and age, we can't earn grace by anything that we do, but that grace is given to us. We find it. It's available to us, but we can't earn it. We can't buy it by, a certain amount of good deeds or, saying the right words at the right time or something like that. It says Noah found grace. It doesn't say that he earned it. It says he found it. And that's the same for us today, is that we find grace through Jesus Christ and through his dying on the cross for us. We find grace and we don't earn it. Psalms 84 verse 11 says, "For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly." I thought that described Noah pretty good. That was a promise straight from God that no good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. I thought about how Noah, he was almost the only faithful one left at that point. And it seems like in our age today, it seems like it's so hard for us to, keep doing what's right and, following the Bible. And yet, most of us are surrounded by people that are also trying and are also serving God. But for Noah, he was all alone to a certain point, and yet he was still faithful. And I think that ought to challenge us that, he was obviously intentional about living right, and because of that, God was able to use him. The other thing I thought of too is, we have wicked men that persecute Christians and take lives, they kill. But somehow God spared Noah's life, even though all this evil was around him. How is it that him and his family hadn't been killed by now? They were different from everyone else. But obviously God spared Noah's life and his family. There would have been a striking difference between how Noah and his family were conducting their lives, in contrast to how everyone else was living. So, I don't think I kind of doubt they were really able to hide somehow. And I think people knew who they were and knew that they were different. But again, God was clearly in control. He spared their lives. So, looking partway down here through chapter 6, God looks, verse 11, verse 12, God looks down upon the earth and it's corrupt. He sees that all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And then in verse 13, God is speaking to Noah, says, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence." And then in verse 14 is where he starts laying out some instructions for Noah. He says, you're supposed to make an ark. He gives the dimensions for the ark, and this is a little more of the interesting part of the chapter, or maybe informative part. Some of these things that we can relate to, measurements and stuff like that. And it says in verse 15, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, in which in feet that would be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. So I was trying to think of something that we could kind of compare to. Does anyone know what the length and width is of this church building? I never measured it, so I don't know. But I thought if we could make a comparison, it'd be maybe two of these buildings stacked on top of each other, and maybe 3 long or something. I don't know if it had been roughly that size or not, but anyhow. The one thought that I did glean was that the ark and the way God told him to build it, it was meant simply for floating, not necessarily for sailing or, traveling or anything like that. It was just simply to float. And I found it interesting as well that so the length is 6 times longer than the width. So it's 450 feet long and it's 75 feet wide. It's a 6-to-1 ratio, and today when they're building ships, they still use a very similar ratio. It's considered perfect, pretty much. The 6 times as long as what it is wide. So I guess that's kind of interesting. Wonder how that all carried down through history, I suppose, through shipbuilders, and there's probably this long understanding about this perfect measurement or this perfect ratio that works good for building ships. Now, I think it's in verse 16. It says, "A window shalt thou make in the ark, and in a cubit thou shalt finish it above, and the door of the ark shall be set in the side thereof." Is there any thoughts about, it says, "In a cubit thou shalt finish it above"? Is there any thoughts on what that might mean? What was that instruction supposed to be telling them?
If you go down to the Art Museum, they actually have a display on this verse, what it could mean. I think they built it with there's like a 18-inch, almost like an air building, the whole top. That was their take on the cubit above, because it, practically speaking, it had to have ventilation.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of us grew up on a farm. You can't pack a whole bunch of animals in a tight building.
Mhm.
It doesn't work. So that was their take on it.
I think that's right, and that was where my mind went too. I thought about all these animals, and I'm like, there had to be an air exchange here somewhere, and I wondered how they did that until I started studying into it, and then, yeah, it seems like around right under the roof there was this vent, I guess, ventilation area. So, yeah. It says it had three floors. Verse 16, it says that with lower, second, and third stories. So I believe I figured out, I believe I still remember from my school days how to figure square footage. Some of you construction guys might know that better. I don't use that real often in my work, but I figure there was, counting all 3 floors, there was roughly 100,000 square feet of floor space. Counting all 3 floors, that all together would have been about 100,000 square feet of floor space. So, quite a bit of room, but there was also a lot of animals and a lot of feed and stuff like that had to go in there. So, moving on into chapter 7, he starts talking about the animals, what all animals are supposed to bring, and how many. Verse 2 talks about the clean beast and the unclean ones. And this was also something that stood out to me. I hadn't noticed this before. that they were actually supposed to bring 7 pairs. Those were of the clean beasts, but then of the unclean beasts, I think it says it was just 1 pair. So it seems like that for these extra pairs of the clean beasts that they had would have been for food and for sacrificing while they were on the ark. So one thing I wanted to bring out was in verse 1, it says, "And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation." The word I want to narrow in on there a little bit is the word come. And this is God saying to Noah, "Come thou into the ark." I thought that's kind of interesting how that was worded. God doesn't say, "Go into the ark." He says, "Come into the ark," which would mean God was already there. God was obviously the designer of this boat. He was the captain of this boat. And God was already in the ark, and he was inviting Noah to come into the ark. Noah, all his house, to come. I found that interesting, how that was there. So they get the animals moved on to the ark. I don't know if you ever wondered how all these animals came together at the right time to come onto the ark. As a little boy, I always wondered how Noah and his boys, did they go out? I mean, they had quite the time rounding up all these animals. That'd been a lot of work, but I don't know if it was that way. I suppose if they had some good horses, they probably could make quick work of it, but some of the smaller critters may be hard to catch. But it seems like one commentator had the thought that these animals that were supposed to come were probably at the right time filled with this migratory instinct. They just had this urge to move, and which would have been God working. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if it really tells us anywhere specifically, at least not that I've found. Maybe someone else knows better, but it seems like the animals just came to Noah, and they got them loaded on the ark. So I wondered, what are some lessons and some encouragement that we can find from Noah's experience here with building the ark and going through all this, in which that took a long time. I think 120 years. I think, if I remember right. So this was nothing small, but and we touched on this a little bit already, that Noah's life spoke. It stood out to God that Noah was still following God. He was still a child of God, I guess you could say. God saw that he was a man that he could use to preserve life, so that God could destroy the world with the flood. And Noah and his family was someone that God could use to help carry out this destruction of the world, and yet there would still be a remnant, I guess, after that. question I would have for myself and for all of us is, what is my life? What is your life? Your speech, your actions telling others? Is it telling the people around you that you don't care about them, that you don't care about how your actions and your speech appear? Or is your life speaking truth? Is it speaking a kindness and a caring attitude for others, for not only their physical needs, but their spiritual needs? If God was looking for someone to carry out a great task, and he would be looking down on us here, would he see your life as someone that he could trust, someone that he could use? That was a challenging thought for me. As I thought about the ark and some parallel thoughts, what it meant to Noah and how the ark, in quote, is for us today. The ark simply meant safety to Noah and his family. And in order to be saved, they had to get on the ark. And I thought about that as salvation for us today. It's available. It's available for us, but we have to accept it. We have to cross that door. We have to get on the ark, so to speak, before it does anything good for us. The door of salvation is still open for us today. That the door of the ark was open. It was open for a long time there. There was a lot of time for people to get on, but there was only a few that did. God has provided an ark of safety through Jesus Christ for us today. As I thought about the flood, I thought about that, and you could take it two different ways. The blood of Christ could be likened unto the flood. That flood washed away all of the sinful men, all of the, it destroyed the wickedness, and when the waters receded, it left a brand new earth for Noah and his family. And the blood of Christ does kind of the same thing for us, washes away all the wickedness, all of the filth, and it leaves a brand new person in us. The old man, or the old works are passed away, and then the new creature, we become a new creature. But the flood was also judgment. And we live today in our minds that God is going to judge the earth again. And just as Noah had been warned that God was going to judge the earth, we're also warned today that he will, not with the flood, though. So, I guess my challenge that I would leave with you all is, have we crossed that door into the ark so that we can be safe when God judges the world again? So, is there any thoughts or anything someone would want to add? If not, I think that's all I have.